Good morning. I'm Dusky Terry, President of ITC Midwest. For the third straight year, we are pleased to be the presenting sponsor for the Iowa Ideas Conference and extraordinarily proud of our partnership with the Gazette. As an electric transmission company serving 2/3 of the state, ITC Midwest is invested in and has a very real stake in the future of Iowa. We've supported this conference since its inception because we embrace its mission of gathering hundreds of Iowans together to explore the key questions and the big ideas that will shape the future of our state. ITC Midwest was formed in 2007 to improve electric transmission reliability and increase transmission system capacity in Iowa. And we followed through on that commitment with more than $4.1 billion in capital investments to date. Our investments in the system not only serve the changing needs of customers, they also provide additional capacities to support economic growth and development of low-cost renewable energy resources. Our investments have resulted in a 62% drop in transmission-related outages since ITC acquired the system and began operating it. From extreme weather events such as last year's derecho to the unprecedented transition to renewable energy, from the rapid adoption of electric vehicles to the increasing focus on energy system resilience, the electric utility industry is suddenly in the national spotlight. All of these forces reinforce the critical role of the transmission grid to support the changing landscape and ensure consumers have access to low-cost, clean, and reliable electricity. You know, we often talk about here at ITC about the power of connection, meaning connections are needed to deliver power to communities. There's also tremendous power when people connect to solve problems. Over the next couple of days, I hope you will engage in the breakout sessions, speak up during discussions, and share your ideas to create a brighter future. Open your mind to different points of view as we all work together to come up with the best solutions for making Iowa an even better place now and in the future. I want to thank you for your participation to help shape the future and wish you a great conference.
Welcome to the 2021 Iowa Ideas Conference's Protecting Workers session in the workforce track. I am John Steppe, your moderator this morning. I'm the Gazette's Hawkeyes reporter, but I covered business until last month. So that's why you have the football reporter moderating a Protecting Workers panel. We have a couple of great panelists here with us this morning, Joe Melton and Joe Henry. But so you don't hear too much of me talking, because I'm assuming you probably didn't join to hear me talk. I will let Joe and Joe fully introduce themselves.
Okay, Joe Henry with the League of United Latin American Citizens, a state political director, also national vice president for Ford Latino. Good to be here.
Joe Melton, director of operations for CSSI. We're the preferred provider for safety services for Master Builders of Iowa, one of two AGC chapters here in the state of Iowa. So I've got 13 years in safety, human performance, and culture improvement. I'm new to this role in the last few months.
So to start out, what would you say is the biggest obstacle when it comes to protecting workers?
Well, I would say OSHA. You know, OSHA here in the state of Iowa needs to really be beefed up. As for the last, I would say, almost 10 years, OSHA has not had enough inspectors to inspect workplaces. Very important, especially last year during the COVID crisis. It's ongoing. Meatpacking was a situation where COVID was just running through those workplaces. OSHA was called out, did not respond effectively. They play a very important role.
Yep, and primarily my career has been in working with organizations to become reliable organizations. And when you're a reliable, dependable, respectable organization, you're doing things internally to build your own culture. You're educating your workers, you're empowering them, you're engaging them. And you know, we here at Master Builders of Iowa, we go beyond compliance. OSHA regulations, DOT, EPA, those are minimal. That's the line you have to be. We try to perform above the line. So a huge push for us, not just thinking about construction, but all industries, is going beyond what you have to do and do what you need to do to keep everyone safe.
Well, that leads really nicely into my next question. What role do you see OSHA playing in protecting workers, and what role should they have?
Just to jump in there, actually, Mr. Melton, why don't you go first? And I'll go next.
No, and that's fine. OSHA has an integral role. First and foremost is to go out and investigate severe incidents and fatalities. That's kind of the number one purpose of OSHA. And after that is imminent danger, when they foresee imminent danger, and then enforce the standards around the book. So within OSHA, there's two arms. You have enforcement and you have consultation. And I think one of the things we can do to educate employers and employees is consultation sometimes gets underutilized. So consultation is huge. There's great folks over there. We work with them here. We have a joint program called WorkSafe. And there's good folks over in enforcement as well. But when someone says, I'm here from OSHA and I'm with enforcement, the kind of a wall goes up. Consultation in Iowa has done tremendous in the last 10 to 15 years of getting organizations to trust them, to come in and work with them, whether that's an audit, a training, industrial hygiene, air testing. We've really come a long ways in a lot of industries in Iowa through consultation. And it's a lot less stressful when they're not coming in because somebody's been hurt, killed, whistleblower, whatever it is. It's because they've invited them in. And when we build that relationship between OSHA, where we're inviting them in versus they have to come in, we're better in every facet.
Mr. Henry, what do you think about this?
Well, clearly OSHA here in the state of Iowa needs to do more. In other states such as Colorado, the state OSHA there has done much more to reflect the recommendations of the CDC and other national entities. When we look at what happened last year, especially in meatpacking, 26,000 workers, many of them are immigrant and most of which are Latino. We saw the speed of work that continued to be at a high pitch, the closeness of workers shoulder to shoulder, and the lack of protective gear. OSHA could have done more then. Not only did they not follow the recommendations that were coming down from the CDC nationally, but there weren't enough people to inspect the workplaces across the state. There were a couple of different OSHA complaints that we filed on behalf of workers in meatpacking that took months for OSHA to respond. So they play a very critical role. It's good to have consultation, but when you look at meatpacking, that really plays a critical role here in Iowa and has workers who are working at unsafe speeds of work. Things need to change in that. OSHA needs to be proactive, not reactive. So a lot more work needs to be done. We hope that in the new administration, there will be more enforcement requirements coming down, not just recommendations, so that states such as Iowa go beyond just minimal enforcement in meatpacking as an example. But there's manufacturing, other sectors, agriculture clearly is a key area here in the state of Iowa. And many folks from the Latino community, immigrant community, play a critical role in that element, but also in construction too, as what Mr. Melton had indicated too. Construction, you see many Latinos and also immigrants playing a critical role in that industry.
And Mr. Henry, how would you evaluate the safety of Iowa's meatpacking plants before and since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic?
Well, they were very unsafe before, and they continue to be unsafe. Just meeting with workers recently again at a pork producing facility near Des Moines, Marshalltown. The speed of work is still high. There's about 1,400 hogs that are go down the line every hour. That was supposed to be reduced due to a decision made by a judge down to 1,100 cuts per hour. That has not happened. We now have meatpacking workers working on different levels, 2-story levels within these facilities, where meat that falls off the conveyor belt falls onto workers right below them. The distance between workers is still shoulder to shoulder. Sometimes workers cut each other with their knives. Fortunately, they have these steel gloves on their hands. Social distancing is not there. Cleanliness is still not there. We have 22 meat processing facilities across the state. More needs to be done. I know that the union has reached out to the administration to do that, but clearly OSHA must do more here in the state, especially in meatpacking.
And then question first for Mr. Melton, how have you seen the conversation change around worker safety since the start of the COVID pandemic that now is kind of hard to believe as it is now 19 months ago?
Yep. It goes back to the hierarchy of controls and safety. When you can engineer out, or eliminate first, if you can eliminate the hazard or risk, once it's been identified and assessed, that's going to be your first and best choice, no matter what the exposure is. If you can't eliminate it, or it's business and infringe to eliminate, then you go to engineering it out. And I think that's one of the things that we've seen a lot of organizations very quickly do, is how can we engineer out exposures? And that's a lot of organizations, when and where they can people work from home? So that's one of the things. Can we set up workstations? In my previous employer, that's something we did a lot, is work with organizations to get people that were able to work remote into a position that's ergonomically safe, get them all this stuff to work remote and do those things. And we've seen a lot of organizations just make long-term business adjustments to where they're not bringing people back in the office. They found that there's a better work-life balance. They're not spending 2 hours in the vehicle. They're more productive, and they can work as productive, if not more, in those remote spaces. The one of the hierarchy of controls we hear the most, which is kind of ironic, is PPE. Everybody now knows PPE, down to my 5-year-old, because of the last 19 months. But in hierarchy of controls, it's the least effective. PPE is the last resort when it comes to safety. As a certified safety professional on the board of certified safety professionals for the entire world, we all know that PPE is our last resort. And in some cases, it's been kind of our first action, rather than going through the hierarchy of controls of eliminate, engineer, administrate, and then last resort is PPE. But organizations that want to, whether they're essential or not, my previous organization, we were not an essential organization, so we moved all our people remote. Some of us were already remote. We weren't able to go out on site and those things. The ones, meat packing and different industries that do heavily rely on people to come into the organization, can we do shift rotations and do some administrative controls before we get to the PPE? And a lot of organizations we worked with just proactively did it because they needed to keep the doors open. And the business demand, not OSHA or other outside, is what drove that real change. And that's kind of the above and beyond compliance. If we just do what's required of us, it doesn't mean we're going to be safe. And we really try to work with organizations to build a culture of inclusion and being reliable. Reliable organizations go beyond what's required of OSHA. And that is something that we preach at MBI, and I've hung my hat on for 13 years and I'll continue to work with, is get organizations to do it because they want to do it, not because someone told them to do it. And the ones that did that through COVID strived through COVID, not just survived it.
Mr. Henry, what do you think about this?
Well, clearly, going back to OSHA, I guess I'm going to beat up on OSHA a lot here, but the lack of enforcement opportunities, workers need to really have pre-meetings on the job, provided information on what their rights are as it applies to safety in the workplace. Unions do a fair amount of this through union negotiations, their contracts, but all workers really need this education, this information, so that they know what their rights are. I mean, we look at meat packing, we look at agriculture, we look at construction, cleaning services, surprisingly have to deal with some hazards in the workplace when they're not only cleaning manufacturing buildings, but also white collar buildings, the liquids that they're using and so forth and so on. They do not know what their rights are. And we, in the state of Iowa, coming back, I have about 40 years of activism, 20 of which were in the union movement. We have not done enough here in Iowa to really help workers understand what their rights are and what type of safety precautions they can take, what type of solutions they're using, how things should be mitigated and so forth. So enforcement, education, again, Iowa, especially when it comes to agriculture, has been noted as feeding the world, but we're not educating our workers. And that's very, very important to do here.
So then if somebody's listening to this who's a worker that is realizing, oh, wait, I should be more educated on this, what's the best way for them to do that?
The University of Iowa has, with their labor center, has some excellent resource information. And for most workers, that might be kind of hard to find that. But, going to the labor center with the University of Iowa, they have some booklets that we have utilized to provide to our community, both in English and Spanish, that really lays out what your rights are in the workplace. When I was in my early 20s, and I was working at United Partial Service in Des Moines, I did not really know what my rights were until I was informed by a nonprofit and provided with a lot of material to read over. So having those pamphlets, having that resource information, I'd like to think that the state of Iowa provides that information, but clearly the Labor Center with the University of Iowa has really done a great job on providing what worker rights are here in Iowa.
And then, Mr. Melton, it seems like Master Builders of Iowa has a lot of educational resources for their members as well.
No, absolutely. And we're a nonprofit, and that's something that, being the director of safety services and over CSSI, we do a lot of 10 hours. And for those people that aren't privy to what that means, there is an OSHA education branch of OSHA for authorized trainers. And we have 4 authorized trainers for construction and general industry. And what I really like in those materials is there's an employee right to know section that's mandatory. And the first hour, well, typically you start off that way, but 1 hour or more is dedicated to what is the employee's rights. And we cover it as well in the 30. And one of the things that we're working on is we have an endowment here that our members chose to slide reserve money over a few years ago and work in workforce development, getting young people in high school and middle school interested in the trades. And it's something that we try to be proactive. I think if OSHA shows up on site, it's already over. We need to get ahead of it. And we are working on with different communities and school districts and educating the administrators and superintendents and school boards on the importance of, for those individuals that are not going to college, which is a large amount of high school students. Let's educate them before they hit the workforce, before they get out there, before they graduate. Get them a 10-hour card. Get them mobile elevated work platform certification cards. Get them the forklift cards. So when they go to the Amazon warehouses and wherever, not to promote Amazon, whoever it is, they're walking in the door already saying, hey, I graduated from Des Moines East, and I have a certified forklift operator card. I have my 10-hour general industry card. Now, I hope those cards say MBI on them, but that's just selfishly. But whoever it is teaching them, let's set them up for success and then get them around the trades. These union halls are empty. They need workers, but we need educated workers. We need them excited, not afraid, to know that they can go in and be safe. And that's something that we work tirelessly here at Master Builders of Iowa with our members, and they volunteer their tradesmen and tradeswomen and tradespeople to go out there and educate these young folks that the trades is an honorable way to earn a living, and it doesn't need to be dangerous or risky or deadly if we do things right. And let's work with our employers to do these things. And the employers are the one that are paying for it. So when we go in, they're our members. And we use grants and all those things, but educate them before they hit the workforce. Get them. That's something that I'm excited about coming over here from my previous employer, is that focus on the local community, partnering with these schools to educate them before they hit, so they know what lockout, tagout, at least maybe not the full repercussions of it, but at least when they go out there and someone's like, hey, go work on that motor, they say, well, wait a minute. That Joe Melton guy said, I need to lock that out. What's that mean? At least they have a little angel on their shoulder saying, don't do that. Because we're not all coming off the farm like we used to think of in Iowa. I grew up on a small farm. When I hit 16 years old to go work, I've been driving anything with a steering wheel since I was 5 years old. That's not the case anymore in Iowa. Our farms are so big, there's fewer people, and the kids aren't leaving the farms that are there. We just don't have that same workforce experience. And some people call it common sense. That's wrong. There is no such thing as common sense. You come out of the womb knowing very few things. After that, it's learned. And we need to do a better job, proactive, and not just rely. And that everything I just said has nothing to do with OSHA.
And then a friendly reminder here to our audience that you can submit your questions. So if you do that in the chat, we will happily get to those. So another question for Mr. Melton: how does the coach but not a cop philosophy work for CSSI?
And it's something that I've been doing for over 10 years, is conversational safety. You're going to get way further having a conversation with someone. And I follow Eisenhower, one of the greatest generals in the history of the United States military. And one of his famous quotes is, you're going to lead, and he was leading men at the time. You're going to get a lot further leading men from point A to point B thinking it was their idea because they want to do it, not because you told them to do it. Same thing in safety. You go up to someone who's been doing the job for 30 years and you're 23 years old and you barely got peach fuzz on your chin. That tradesman's going to look you in. Yeah, I've been doing this long, you've been alive, boy, get out of here. And that's what's happening out there. So when we lead as a coach and not a cop, we come around the corner and see someone doing something incorrectly, let's go have a conversation with them, not at them. And more importantly, we know from human behavior, the ABCs of human behavior, antecedent, behavior, consequence. Catch people doing stuff right. And that's something that we lead our leaders, our frontline supervisors, our foremen. It doesn't matter what industry. I've worked in every industry in all 50 states, all North America. When we get frontline leaders, supervisors, foremen, managers, whoever they are, go out there. When you see, if I'm out there, John, and I see you climbing a ladder wrong, I coach you and ensure before I walk away that you understand the correct way, but you also understand why. Because if you fall off that ladder, John, you can't go cover the Iowa Hawkeyes as the #2 team in the nation if your back is broken. Do you understand why I'm looking out for your safety? What's your personal commitment to you and your family? That's one. Now, the science tells us 6 good catches. Now, we teach leaders of all organizations, go out there and catch them right 6 times. Hey, John, thank you for climbing the ladder correctly. And hey, John, I see you setting up the ladder. How are we going to do this? Catch you right 6 times. Good job, John. Way to lead by example. And that's how you lay the framework to become a reliable organization, an employer of choice, not an employer of last resort.
I might be staying off ladders now for the rest of the football season, now thinking about that.
Yeah.
But Mr. Henry, why are these issues so important for Iowa's Latinx community?
Well, they're important because, our community is rebuilding Iowa in many different ways. When we look at many communities across the state and the type of work that is being done, it's being done by Latinos and new Iowans, immigrants coming into the state. I mean, clearly we saw that during the recession, that it was, we had white flight, we had a lot of young white people leaving the state for other opportunities, and it was the immigrant population coming in that was doing the work, rebuilding many communities. Mr. Melton was right about, we need to provide opportunities for our young people, especially in high school. They need to know how to work with their hands. The building trades are clearly the way to go. I mean, I'm 65 now, but when I was in high school in Des Moines back in the 60s and 70s, I mean, we had some mandatory classes in the building trades. That has been taken out of education. That should be put in, that should be mandatory. Latinos are playing a key role, again, in the economy in Iowa. We're fueling the economy, but we need the skills. We need the skills in high school. Now, many immigrants who come here with skills from other countries. And again, Latinos, immigrants come with those skills, but there's other skills that need to be learned in schools, high schools, need to really have those mandatory courses. There needs to be 2-year after high school education in the building trades to really work on those skills. Iowa has a unique position in this country, and it is based upon not only agriculture, but construction, the building trades, the many things that we do. So we need to really add in and make it a requirement in public schools to do their part and to connect with the building trades to make sure that our young people know what their options are, that they know how to work with their hands and with their minds without having to wait for a 4-year degree that may provide them with awareness and knowledge, but not the type of skill set that's going to give them opportunities with future jobs in Iowa. So very, very important. So that would be my addition to this discussion.
Is there a particular reason why either of you think that hasn't been a part of the education for a while? Or at least not what it used to be?
I think the building trades have been undervalued. I think there's been a profit motive added to education where colleges have made a lot of money off promoting 4-year degrees in other degrees without an emphasis on, what will young people really have an opportunity for. And, public education has not taken responsibility on providing counseling. We know that here in Iowa, especially in Des Moines, a counselor has 400 kids that they have to reach out to. That's one time in 3 or 4 months that a counselor would have an opportunity to sit down with a high school kid to talk about their future. So education, lack of funding for counseling, lack of responsibility by the schools themselves to provide direction, the need for mandatory classes. But again, funding's in one of the key parts, lack of counselors, the erosion of those type of things. Again, when I was young, not only did we have mandatory classes in the building trades, but we also had counselors who we were able to meet with in high school on a monthly basis. That no longer exists. Big erosion in education.
Mr. Melton, what do you think about this?
I think too, when you're directing a young person, there's a mutual partnership between the parents or guardians in the school. The school has those young people for a large piece of time. But when you think about influential, think about who your village is. John, why did you become a beat writer? There was an interest there. Why did I get into safety? Well, I backed my way into this sucker. I'll tell you that. I started off in maintenance, and everybody's got their own story. Joe Henry into advocating and the things that you do. We all got our own motivation. But you think back to, it was in our village. Was it a 4-H leader? There's so many great nonprofits with Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, FFA, 4-H, as I mentioned. I was in 4-H, I had a great 4-H leader. And one of the things in 4-H, there's a safety component. So I was always kind of interested. My dad worked for Union Pacific Railroad and hobby farm down the side. Well, there was always PPE around. And my dad just hammered on us from the young age. And everybody that's around Boone, Iowa, where I'm from, everybody tried to get those leather gloves, because Union Pacific would hand out leather gloves that are free. If you knew someone that worked there, give me a pair of those leather gloves. And right on there it says UP, safety first. And you would see in the 90s when they were promoting that, and you do it grassroots. And that's what we're trying to do at Master Builders of Iowa with our workforce program, is we have these virtual reality sets. And we go out there to the schools and different nonprofits and get them on the young people so they start playing with them, because they love the virtual reality. And they get those things on and they're like, oh man, this is cool. And they're doing a pipe fitter job, or it's about getting them excited. And I am a high school football coach. I've coached for 8 years, and you get way further when you're excited and you're showing the outcome. Like, man, if you go, these employers will pay you while you're learning. And after you're done with your apprenticeship, these guys are making $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 a year, or gals, whoever. And the females into the trades is booming, and that's good. And to let them know that it's not just a male dominated in the trades, that it can be any individual, and we need that. And so it starts at home too, educating the parents that we are influential. We have a freshman at high school, my wife and I do, having those conversations. We got her, she wanted to enroll in the ACE program at our school. There's so many resources available in these schools, that little nudge from the parent and guardian. So it's like most big issues, there isn't a one size fits all answer. It's really put every single person in front of the mirror and say, our village, we're all influential. It could be the neighbor down the street, an aunt and uncle, a grandparent, a coach, a teacher, a Sunday school teacher, a pastor, a priest, whoever. We're all influential. And I've just been very blessed in my life to be surrounded by a lot of influential people that understood when these hands are idle, I can be destructive, but when these hands are busy, we can be really productive, and get those young people thinking, how can we be productive? And what are you going to find happiness? And get that instilled early, rather than, well, my mom or dad work here, I guess that's what I'm going to do. There's nothing wrong with that.
How does that virtual reality, I'm kind of trying to picture the goggles there.
Well,
how does that work?
I'll text my coworker here and have him bring in a headset, and I'll kind of show everybody, but they just fit like a normal virtual. So if we're going out to Mr. Henry, I don't know where you graduated from, but if we go out to Roosevelt High School, we're going to invite on that track line, if it's pipe fitter, we'll reach out to a member to send a pipe fitter, and then they can speak to it and give their story. So it's more impactful when we partner with a tradesperson, and we lean on our membership for that.
So then a question here that we got, I have a friend who needs leather gloves and steel-toed boots for her son for high school trades, but there are no assistance programs available to her as a low-income single parent. I'm afraid her son will miss out. How can they get help to get started?
Wow, that's a very important question. I mean, a lack of resources on how to access those type of things. That there's not an answer that I can provide here, but just listening to what Mr. Melton had to say is, we do have a number of nonprofits out there that want to help communities, but those nonprofits, though, unfortunately, can only help so many people. We need government agencies to get involved. Schools need to get involved. There needs to be resource centers for this family to provide those type of resources. Growing up in a single parent family, it was very hard for my mother to help me to figure out what needed to be done. Had it not been for counselors at a high school that I was going to, Lincoln High School, I don't know where I would have been. I don't know where I would be today. So that's difficult. I think Mr. Melton's probably going to say the building trades, plumbers and steam fitters, iron workers might have an office nearby to go. But what I would also say before his response is, we need to do a deeper dive. We need to really find ways to connect the nonprofits with the building trades and really put up more requirements on the schools to do a better job. Just in Des Moines alone, Des Moines schools, the biggest district in the state of Iowa, has over $1 billion in an annual budget, 35,000 kids, tremendous opportunities to do more. I know they have good people on the school board, they have a good superintendent, but I think they're really missing the importance of connecting, doing more than just checking a few boxes on what they've achieved in order to get their funding. They need to do a better job, because that's where it happens. You get the mentors who are actually getting paid to do the job, to be mentors, and then they should be reaching out to the nonprofits and doing a better job with the building trades too. The building trades shouldn't have to be invited into the schools to do their presentation. They should be required, they should be asked on a regular basis.
Mr. Melton, do you have any advice here?
Yeah, and one of the things that we do with our members as well, and we have members of all trades, and we do job fairs, and we're coming up on our big job fair season and getting these virtual headsets out there. So, my counterpart, Ben Hammis, is going to bring one in, and him and I kind of help try to lead that up and get these out to these job fairs and get them on those young people and get them in front of trades. So we're actually having trades sponsor. So if you have your local HVAC company up in Sioux City, Iowa, they're going to sponsor. And so they're requesting, because they're a member, we'll send up the headsets. So when that job fair is going on in Sioux City and those kids walk through there, they say, hey, have you ever thought about entering the trades? And they go, oh, not really. Would you like to play with this headset? Well, yeah, I'm a 16-year-old kid. I'll put a headset on. And just kind of give you an image of what they look like. You put these headsets on these young people, it really gets them excited because they like playing these video games. And then once they get it on, then you're able to walk them through. So we've got a couple dozen of these that we send out. So we're able to send them to multiple job fairs in the schools and so forth. But I don't know, we try to take a proactive, positive approach and, just tackle that elephant one bite at a time. You look too far down the road, you'll get overwhelmed with how much need is out there, and you just keep, I don't know, I just take a positive approach and you just keep chunking it out, and we're going to get there. And it's just takes a lot of people like myself that are from Iowa. I grew up here, and I'm fourth generation. I love my state, and just keep getting that passion and fire. Just because you're from here, it shouldn't be a death sentence because it's cold or there's a lot of corn or whatever it is. Like, this is a great opportunity, and getting these headsets out there, we're really excited for this program.
So then anywhere in particular that you'd recommend for someone who needs some assistance in terms of getting the things like leather gloves, like the steel-toed boots that are then necessary for kind of that first step?
Steel workers. That's one part, because they have Firestone in Des Moines. I believe the name has changed now, but yeah, the building trip plumbers and steam, the unions really do have access to that information. When I worked at Firestone back in 1984, I mean, we knew where the shop was for the steel-toed shoes and the gloves and so forth. Those shops have moved around. A lot of them are online now, but checking first probably with high school counselors, putting the pressure on the counselors, the high school, especially in the shops, contacting the building trades. I don't know exactly how you would Google them. Contacting us in LULAC, League of United Latin American Citizens, be more than willing to help. That we have 23 councils across the state. We are a growing organization. We also have another group called Forward Latino. So we're trying to really reflect our growing community here across the state. So we do provide a lot of resources on that too.
And then kind of changing gears here to another big issue around protecting workers, vaccinations. How important is that as kind of a piece of this worker safety since the start of COVID? And are companies doing enough around this area?
Companies are doing a better job now than they were last year. Many employers, especially in manufacturing and meat processing, were not doing the job last year. Delays that led to thousands of people being infected, tens of thousands of people being infected in agriculture and meat packing, and then also led to a couple dozen deaths in meat packing here in Iowa. They have not done enough job. And the other part of it is just the false information that has been coming out. We in the Latino community are starting a program right now where we'll be doing a lot of multimedia promotion on the importance of vaccinations, working with clinics and so forth, starting actually this week to do that across the state. We know that a number of our community members, surprisingly, have not taken the vaccination. Last year, we were concerned because the companies weren't promoting it. This year, we know that companies are now promoting it, but because of disinformation, we have so many community members that have not taken the vaccination. So we need to do more as a nonprofit, as other nonprofits, across the state to really promote that.
Mr. Melton, what do you think about this?
Yeah, I guess I had a different experience than Mr. Henry, and that's okay. Everyone gets different experiences. I worked a lot with large and middle-sized supply chain food organizations out there in my previous life. Very early on, one of the things that we did is organized corporate safety directors across the country, realizing that not everybody had all the information. You look at March, April, May. So we started a huge a networking platform that all the corporate safety directors and their staff, we had over 100 organizations, primarily that were all deemed essential operations in food supply chain. And I mean, the proactive conversations that were going on, separating people, who needs to be there, who doesn't need to be there, what can we do in operations to change and spread them out. What creative ways? I mean, we were helping them source hand sanitizer from ethanol plants up in Northwest Iowa that were flipping operations to get them 55-gallon drums to get them in these high areas so their people had what they needed when they needed it. Working directly with 3M to get masks that were in different organizations, but 3M's right up in Aberdeen, South Dakota. They were expanding their plant as fast as they could, working triple shift, getting as many people safely operating. I guess my experience is these organizations deemed if we're going to be reliable, if we're going to get dog food and cat food and different, and flour and all these different organizations we're working with, if we're going to get this on the shelves for the people that need them, we can't wait for guidance. We need to do what we need to do to keep our operation running, and that's protect our most important asset. In all these safety directors and senior leaders, it's their people. So they were very proactive. And when the vaccine came out, all of these organizations were sourcing them directly, going to their plants, offering them, educating their people. They didn't wait on anyone else. And that's what reliable organizations do. They don't sit on their hands and wait. They lead from the front. And I would say by and large, a lot of organizations were leading from the front, from my experience. And that's all I have to go by is these folks were constantly ringing our phone off the hook, just for information and leaning on each other. Hey, what are you doing? What are you doing in networking? And it worked really, really well. Now, it wasn't perfect, but, they were able to be productively safe.
I just want to add to that. I mean, we definitely saw a 2-month delay from meatpacking workers stating that people were getting sick in the facilities, ill, dying. Of course, that the deaths began actually early April. And then moving forward, the vaccinations, yes, there was a lot of voluntary work that was done, not mandatory within meatpacking. Tyson, of course, had many people who were getting ill and also dying. Waterloo plant facility was a perfect example of that. OSHA played a critical part in not putting pressure on these companies. And it wasn't until lawsuits were underway that we saw these companies started to kind of line up and do the right thing. But, employers in this state should not be doing that type of thing, waiting for a lawsuit to happen, waiting for a death to occur. And again, state OSHA did not do a good job. It took months for us after we filed complaints to get a response, to get an investigation going. And, yes, other employers who had white employees as a majority probably did a better job. But when it came to minority employees, immigrants, Latinos, Asians, Blacks, those employers with the majority of the workforce being from those groups did not do a good job at all. We heard about the bets that were being made at Tyson and Waterloo about how many people would die. So shame on those companies for doing that. But I think that leads to another important thing is, employers need to be much more proactive, need to be much more responsible, and need to realize what they're doing, especially when it comes to communities of color as a workforce. And again, the state and the federal government play a key role on this. The state needs to be more accountable regarding safety, especially with COVID. With the safety gear that was provided by plants, facilities, manufacturing, yes, that was provided, but the speed of work, the distance between workers was shoulder to shoulder. It was not the 6 feet social distancing. We had statements made by companies stating our facilities are not built for social distancing. It's not going to happen. Well, you know what? If it's not built for that, and if people are going to die, you need to change one way or another. And that's why we're having these discussions now on how meat processing should be done. Should vertical integration happen? Should we have hog confinement centers? Do we need to do something that's called regenerate farming, so forth and so on? So lots of discussions, but I needed to bring that up because it's not a rosy picture from last year. And we will hopefully these employers will learn, but it's going to take enforcement.
Do you think that requirement of the vaccine is a step that needs to be taken?
Without a doubt. I mean, it should be required. There's so much false information out there where you have a significant portion of the workforce that is not taking the vaccination because they're listening to this false narrative. It should be mandatory. I mean, my father had polio when he was young. I mean, clearly back in the 40s, you know, it was a patriotic thing to take vaccinations. Now it's considered a freedom to reject these type of things. That's crazy. So it needs to be required. It needs to be mandatory. The history of this country shows that when these outbreaks occur, you know, it is a requirement of people to get vaccinated. It's not a free choice.
Mr. Melton, what do you think about this?
Yeah, you know, I just go back to what we did when the vaccines were coming out, you know, getting them out in all areas of the country, getting the vaccines out to the people and educating them on all what it can do, and you know, education being the key there. So I just look back to what we were able to do early on in getting them out in all businesses into individuals. I guess that was just the approach that we've taken and continue to take.
So do you think a requirement of vaccines is a necessary step?
You know, at Master Builders of Iowa, you know, we work with our member associations on what is best for them and the areas that they're in. You know, we don't take a stance one way or the other on it, I guess. You know, I'm not going to speak for my organization on making a mandate versus not making a mandate and those things. You know, we try to follow the rules that are passed through legislation onto the Senate, onto the president, and that's how OSHA rules come into play. So when we look at what is on the books, that's what we try to guide our members through. And when this one goes through legislation up through the Senate and through the normal routes, then we'll do the same as we have done with all other standards: lockout, tagout, confined space, trenching, all those.
And then a reminder to our audience with just a little under 15 minutes left to make sure to put any questions in the chat there. How much of the changes that were made by some companies during COVID do you expect to still be here long term, or is this going to be kind of a going back to 2019 kind of thing?
I can go, or yeah, I can go first on that one. I think it goes to non-essential personnel being able to work from home. You're eliminating. We know from data that about roughly, give or take, 5,000 to 6,000 fatalities occur in the workplace every year. Somewhere in there it changes, but you look at the data, about 5,000 or 6,000. 35,000 to 40,000 people die on the roadway every year. You're more likely to die on your way to work than once you get there. So eliminate how many people need to drive to work. And those are in the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Okay, go look them up. 35,000 to 40,000 people die on the roadway every year. So some of the things I think organizations are looking at, why are we paying for brick and mortar? You know, you're looking at a lot of buildings. I'm right downtown. I'm looking at a lot of big buildings going, there's not a lot of people in there right now because these organizations are going, they're more productive. I worked from home for 19 months. I was able to let the dog out. You talk about, we're talking about mental happiness and all these things, productivity. We're finding that when people are able to set up, and not everybody's able to do this, but where you're able, do the remote work. The other thing is I remember all the time, my dad's like, oh man, I feel like not good, right? And he'd power through and go to work. Well, I think now there's well, wait a minute. Let's look for everybody, because it's kind of in our American culture, a badge of toughness that you could work through whatever illness you have, as long as it wasn't, I don't know, something before COVID, you can come up with it. But there's this badge of honor to work through it. Well, now I think we've culturally stepped back and go, whoa, maybe we should not come to work. There's a lot of places that are still doing temperature checks. Those are good things. So I think a lot of good things are in play here as well. So that's, I don't know, my approach on it.
Mr. Henry, what do you think about this?
Well, I think I'm hoping that these companies look at redesigning their workplaces to prepare for the inevitable. There will be other outbreaks of viruses and so forth and so on. I keep on bringing up meatpacking, but that's a perfect example of an industry that really is the way that the buildings are constructed. I mean, they amplify whatever is in that system because it's a closed system. There's really no ventilation in those workplaces. Those workers will not be able to work from home. And those facilities need to change. Now, Secretary Vilsack, did bring up some things after President Biden did some executive actions, a number of them a couple of months ago, talking about changes in agriculture and the movement from traditional, well, they're not really traditional, meat processing to meat lockers that are different types of facilities where animals are butchered or slaughtered. And hog confinement centers need to be removed. They need to be taken away. There needs to be traditional ways of slaughtering hogs because the way that the hog confinement centers are set up right now, they not only are dangerous for the workers and the animals, but they pollute the environment, the waterways, and so forth. So those facilities need to be clearly done away with. Meat processing needs to change, re-engineered. So there's social distancing, movement towards meat lockers. Since agriculture plays such a critical role in the state, those things really need to change. But there'll be many workers who, especially those people from our community who work in those workplaces, who will never have that opportunity to work from home. So those places need to change. But without government regulation leading the way, that's not going to happen. So government really needs to work on that regulation. OSHA needs to play a key role. CDC needs to really make things much more mandatory. I hope that that's happening. The Department of Agriculture needs to also play a key role.
And then, Mr. Melton, how does data play into making workplaces safer?
Oh, data has always been huge. We use it in everything. Use it in sales when you're filling a funnel for leads, marketing, survey. We use it in every aspect. And safety is something that I've done for over 10 years. There's lots of great data that you can use. It's a leading indicator. Okay, so that's one of the things we work with reliable organizations is to gather important leading data and then make an educated decision and an action plan to tackle it. When you're only gathering lagging indicator, you're looking at a recordable rate or your insurance modification rate or your LTIR, whatever it is, that's in the rear view mirror. That stuff's already happened. You want to prevent what's forward, start measuring things that people do. And some of that is how many toolbox talks are conducted, how many people were there, how many quizzes were done, okay, how many proactive inspections were done. Of your inspections and your walkthroughs, the corrective actions, how many were closed on time, how many behavior-based safety observations are there, did they actually have a conversation? All this is stuff that people have to do. You can put a person in a chair in the corner and tell them not to move all day, and they not move, and they probably won't get hurt. You put them on the line or whatever it is and they start working, then that's where the potential comes. Let's start measuring things that people do. And then the score on the scoreboard is going to take care of itself. Same thing in football and sports. Anything that I'm coaching. This year I get to coach kindergarten girls basketball and we're super jacked. we're going to have a lot of fun. But we're going to measure the things that they can control. And that scoreboard is going to take care of itself. Did you show up on time? Did you bring a positive attitude? Did you come ready to be a great teammate? Are you communicating? Did your feet move? Measure the things that people can control and that outcome part. And it starts with education too. Training, it's important. But that's a requirement. You have to train your people. Whether you're in the 1910 or 1926 OSHA standard, you have to train your people. There's a 501A general duty clause. You have to train. That's the law. Now, how effective that training is, that's where we come in with Master Builders of Iowa. We want to do the highest quality hands-on and look at all aspects of the human learning. Not everybody learns by lecture. Most people learn by hands-on, getting on it, and let's do it. And we're excited to bring with different individuals like Jerry Eslick with PRI. He's got great simulators. I know from working in the grain handling industry, it was eye-opening, John, when I got to go into a simulator. They put a harness on me, they tied me off and filled me up to about my chest with grain in a simulator. And I go, wow, I'm a former college football player and I can't get out of this. That was eye-opening. So we're super excited to get more hands-on, to expand the education. You see these simulators at the Iowa State Fair. We've got a trenching simulator, a fall protection simulator, a confined space simulator. We've got these headsets. We're trying to be cutting edge out there. And right now, the driving force is the employers. The employers are the one driving it. OSHA hasn't mandated any of this. And when we go beyond what OSHA says we have to do, it's going to take care of itself. And that's what we promote here at MBI, is beyond compliance.
Yeah, John, I did just want to add, there needs to be safety committees adopted in the workplace. In my opinion, they need to be mandatory. On line speed, not only in meat packing, but in manufacturing, workers should have the right to shut down the line if the speed of work is going beyond what is noted in safety standards. Coming out, one of my first adult jobs was working at UPS and having to deal with working on the line, conveyor belts, and we had a union contract in place with the Teamsters. And there were a number of times where I just hit that safety button, shut down that belt, and I didn't have to worry about getting fired because I had a union contract in place that I could rely on. But those things are very important. And for people who are working in those blue collar jobs, the ability to shut down the line, especially if they don't have sufficient breaks in between work. I can tell you that a meat packer in Marshalltown at JBS, they have a lunch break at 11. They start at 6:30. They have one little break in between 6:30 and 11:30, half hour lunch. And then not until they clock out at 3:30 are they able to stop working at a constant speed. If it's an unsafe speed and they're working during that all the time, they need to have that right to shut down that line without any type of negative recourse from the employer.
And then just a couple minutes left. So I'll ask each of you if you have any closing thoughts, starting with Mr. Melton.
Yeah, I guess I continue to challenge people. We change culture with behavior, and our individual behavior is going to change the culture. So if we're looking to have a more inclusive culture, go back to the community you live in. What are you doing? I've tried to volunteer as much as I can. I grew up in 4-H. I had 1,000 hours of community service when I was in high school, not because the judge said I had to, because my mom was very proactive. Okay, so it's make your community better. Go out and walk ditches, clean up. And lead by example, not wait for someone else going, well, gee, someone else should pick up that broom and sweep it. I grab the broom and sweep it. You lead by example. Grab your kids, go out and show the importance of caring where you live. It doesn't matter where you live. I didn't grow up in an area that had a lot of money. And what we did have, my parents and raised me and my 7 siblings to look at, this is ours, we take care of it. It might not be new, might not be the shiniest, but we're going to take care of and do the best we can. In every household, every community, we all can be more positive influences. Get involved. And I've coached all sports, Sunday school, everything. Get out and just be a positive influence for a young person. Be a reason that they showed up. Don't be a reason why, well, I quit because I had to play for Coach Melton. That would be a death sentence to me. I would never want to hear that. I showed up even though I wasn't the best. But man, Coach Melton was high energy. And as you can tell right now, I'm a high energy guy and I'm positive. And that's how I like to drive change. Give people a reason to show up. Don't give them a reason not to.
And then Mr. Henry, your closing thoughts?
Yeah, we're in a state of 3 million people with a lot of land mass per person. We have a great history, especially of immigrants coming to this state, rebuilding this state. We have opportunities as nonprofits, as employers, as unions, master builders, and so forth, to really connect, to work together, to help each other out. It isn't rocket science. We definitely need to provide more mentoring to our young people, because our young people expect it. All our community members expect to have that support. I mean, the history of this state with Henry A. Wallace, George Carver Washington, I believe it was his name. We have a history of helping each other, of changing things not only in the state but across the world. We need to work together. We need to really get back to that historical perspective, helping each other out, providing that mentoring beyond families to our community, getting involved, and really holding state government agencies accountable to the role that they play in our society here in Iowa.
Well, thank you so much, both Joe and Joe, for your time today. That was a great session. I hope our audience will stick around this afternoon. We have a lunch break, and then at 12:30 is Kelly Garcia from the Iowa Department of Human Services and Iowa Department of Public Health, Governor Kim Reynolds at 1:15, and then we will have the afternoon sessions in the workforce track. There's apprenticeships at 2:00 and rural survival in the workforce at 3:10. And then to close things out for the workforce track today, it will be workforce issues in upskilling and seasonal employment at 4:20. Thank you again and have a good lunch.